Kwesi and Ajoa lived in a small, cozy apartment in Accra. Their home was simple, with walls painted in soft cream and windows that let the sunlight in every morning. The apartment was not large, but it had everything they needed. There was a small kitchen where Kwesi loved to cook, a living room with a comfortable sofa, and a tiny balcony where Ajoa kept her favorite plants. They had lived there for 3 years, and in that time, the apartment had started to feel like it was part of them. Every morning, Kwesi woke up early. He liked the quiet hours before the city came alive. He would make himself a cup of tea and look out of the window. He liked to see people walking to work, children running with their school bags, and the street vendors setting up their small stalls. Life was simple, but Kwesi liked it that way. He did not need a big house or expensive things. He liked the feeling of knowing every corner of his home and every sound of his street. Ajoa usually woke a little later. She liked to stay in bed for a few more minutes, listening to the soft sounds of the city. When she finally got up, she would water her plants. Ajoa had a small collection of flowers and herbs on the balcony. She loved how they grew little by little every day. She felt proud of them because it showed that small things could bring joy. Kwesi would often watch her while she tended to her plants and think how lucky he was to share his life with someone so gentle. After Ajoa watered her plants, she would help Kwesi in the kitchen. Sometimes she chopped vegetables while he fried eggs or cooked beans. Other times, Kwesi prepared the food while Ajoa set the table. They had a routine and it made life feel safe and peaceful. They liked quiet mornings, warm meals, and the small talks they shared over breakfast. They never rushed, even when the day outside seemed to move fast. Their apartment had a small living room where they liked to sit in the evenings. There was a sofa that was soft and old, but they loved it. On the walls, they had pictures of their family and friends. Kwesi had a picture of his father when he was young, and Ajoa had one of her mother standing in a garden. They liked to look at these pictures sometimes, remembering stories that were told and stories that were yet to be told. In the evenings, they often listened to the radio. They liked songs with slow beats and voices that sounded soft and kind. Sometimes they talked about small things, the smell of the rain, a bird that sat on the balcony, or a neighbor who had a new pet. These small talks made their evenings comfortable. They felt no need to go far for happiness. Their small apartment was enough. Their bedroom was simple. It had a small wardrobe, a dresser, and a mattress that was soft and comfortable. Every night, they slept on this mattress and dreamed quietly. They never imagined that something unusual could be hiding in their own home. Every corner of the apartment seemed normal. The walls, the floor, the windows, and even the mattress, all seemed ordinary. They felt safe and content. Sometimes, Kwesi would notice small things like a sound that he could not explain or a smell that seemed different. But he never paid much attention. He thought it was normal for old buildings to make noises. Ajoa also noticed small changes sometimes, like a leaf that had fallen in a strange place or a little dust that collected too fast. But she always cleaned it and forgot about it. Life was simple and they liked it that way. On weekends they liked to spend time outside. Sometimes they walked to the local market, buying fresh fruits, vegetables, or small treats. Other times they stayed at home and cooked together. They liked to try new recipes or make dishes they had eaten as children. These moments made their life feel full. Even in small ways they celebrated life. Kwesi liked to sit by the window in the evenings watching the sunset. The sky would turn orange and pink, and the city would glow with lights. Ajoa sometimes joined him, holding a cup of tea. They would sit quietly, not needing words, feeling the warmth of the day slowly fade. These moments were simple but beautiful. They liked how quiet and calm life could be, even in a busy city like Accra. At night, after dinner, they would clean up together. Kwesi would wash the dishes and Ajoa would dry them and put them away. Then they would go to the living room and read or listen to the radio. Sometimes, Kwesi would read aloud a story from a book, and Ajoa would smile and listen carefully. They liked how ordinary moments could feel special when shared together. Their life was full of small routines, but it never felt boring. They enjoyed the simplicity of their days. They liked how they could trust their home to be safe and quiet. They liked how the apartment felt like a warm space where they could be themselves. They liked how the mattress was always soft and welcoming at the end of the day. Kwesi often thought about the future. He wanted to continue living simply, with Ajoa by his side. He wanted to make small improvements in the apartment, like fixing the balcony or painting the walls. But he also wanted life to stay peaceful, just as it was. He liked the feeling of knowing every corner, every sound, and every smell. Ajoa also thought about small dreams. She wanted more plants on the balcony, maybe a small vegetable garden. She wanted to learn to cook new dishes and share them with Kwesi. She liked thinking about small changes that could make life more joyful without making it complicated. Together, they often sat in the living room at night, talking quietly. They talked about their day, their friends, or the small happenings in the city. They laughed at small jokes and shared stories from their childhood. Life felt complete in these small moments. They did not need big adventures to feel happy. Even though everything seemed ordinary, there was a small part of Kwesi and Ajoa that wondered if there was more to life. They did not look for it actively, they simply felt a small curiosity. Sometimes they imagined finding something surprising in their home, like an old letter or a small treasure. They laughed at these thoughts, thinking they were silly. But the curiosity was there, quietly waiting in the background. They never thought that this curiosity would become important. They never imagined that their ordinary, peaceful life could hide something unusual right under their eyes. For now, they enjoyed their simple mornings, their warm meals, the sunlight on the balcony, and the quiet nights on their soft mattress. They liked how small things could make life beautiful. They liked how their home felt safe and familiar. They liked how ordinary life could feel extraordinary when shared with someone you love. Every day, Kwesi and Ajoa woke up with the same routines, felt the same comfort, and enjoyed the same small joys. Life was simple, ordinary, and peaceful. The apartment, the plants, the kitchen, and the mattress, they all seemed normal. And yet, in this normal life, something unusual waited quietly, unnoticed. Something that could surprise them, change their small routines, and teach them that even ordinary places could hide secrets. But for now they did not know. They only knew peace, warmth, and comfort. One night, Kwesi was lying in bed trying to fall asleep after a long day. The room was quiet, and the only sound was the soft hum of the fan turning above their heads. Suddenly, he heard a faint rustling sound coming from under the bed. He froze, listening carefully. The sound was soft but distinct, like something brushing against the floor. He sat up slowly and looked under the bed, but it was dark and he could see nothing. Probably the wind, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. He did not want to worry Ajoa. She was already asleep, dreaming quietly, and he did not want to disturb her. He pulled the blanket tighter around himself and tried to ignore the sound. It was strange, but he convinced himself it was nothing important. The rustling stopped after a few moments and he finally relaxed. The next morning, Kwesi did not mention the noise to Ajoa. He thought she might laugh or worry unnecessarily. Instead, he poured himself a cup of tea and sat by the window watching the city come alive. He thought about the rustling sound for a few moments but then distracted himself with small chores. Life was too simple to spend time thinking about unimportant noises. Days passed and everything seemed normal again. Kwesi continued his morning routines, making breakfast and looking after the small apartment. Ajoa continued to water her plants and tend to the small balcony garden. They went about their lives quietly, enjoying the ordinary routines that gave them comfort. But the small rustling sound remained in Kwesi's memory. He sometimes wondered if it might happen again, but each time he heard nothing, he relaxed. Then one afternoon, Ajoa noticed a faint smell coming from the mattress. She had been changing the bedsheets when she paused and frowned slightly. The smell was subtle, almost like something old or dusty, but different enough to catch her attention. She sniffed again and wrinkled her nose. "It's nothing," she said aloud, shrugging her shoulders. She thought maybe the mattress was just old or that dust had collected over time. She replaced the sheets and continued with her day, thinking no more about it. Kwesi later that evening noticed that Ajoa seemed distracted while sitting on the sofa. She was arranging the cushions, frowning slightly. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Ajoa waved her hand dismissively. "It's nothing," she said. "Maybe I just noticed a small smell in the bedroom. Probably just dust." Kwesi nodded, understanding her words, but he could sense a little worry in her tone. Still he said nothing more. The couple ignored these tiny hints, thinking it was just ordinary life. They went on with their days, doing the same things as before. Kwesi would make breakfast, Ajoa would water the plants, and in the evenings they would sit quietly together, enjoying their peaceful apartment. Life felt simple and calm, and they did not want small disturbances to ruin that feeling. At night, Kwesi sometimes thought about the rustling under the bed. He would lie awake for a few minutes, wondering if he should check again. But each time he told himself it was probably the wind, or maybe a small insect that had entered the room. He did not want to make it bigger than it was. Ajoa, on the other hand, rarely noticed the sounds. She was too focused on her plants, her books, and the routines of the day. Even when the smell returned occasionally, Ajoa ignored it. She cleaned the room more thoroughly, aired the sheets in the sun, and even sprinkled some fresh powder on the mattress. But each time the smell seemed to fade only temporarily. She told herself it was nothing important, just a part of living in an old apartment. She did not think to tell Kwesi and he did not think to ask. As the days went on, small signs continued to appear. Sometimes Kwesi would hear faint noises when he walked past the bed. They were soft, almost like whispers or tiny movements. At first, he tried to listen carefully, trying to identify what it was. But the sounds always stopped as soon as he focused, leaving only silence. He began to question his own hearing. Maybe it was his imagination, he thought. Maybe he was just tired after work. Ajoa noticed other things. A small piece of dust that moved oddly on the floor, a faint shadow on the wall that disappeared when she looked directly at it, or a soft thump that came from the mattress when no one was near. Each time she paused and thought about it, but then she dismissed it. She told herself life was too simple to worry about strange noises or smells. Their apartment had always been quiet, and small oddities were probably normal. Despite these signs, life continued its ordinary rhythm. Kwesi and Ajoa shared breakfast, went about their work, and tended to their home. They laughed at small jokes, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company. They never argued or raised questions about the strange things happening. Their love for each other and their home made them feel safe. Nothing in the apartment seemed threatening, only mysterious in a tiny, unimportant way. One afternoon, Ajoa mentioned the smell again casually as she rearranged the pillows. "I noticed the mattress again," she said softly. "It has a faint smell, but I think it's nothing." Kwesi smiled. "Probably the wind or maybe just the mattress," he said. They both laughed lightly. It became a small joke between them, a mystery that was never solved but also never troubling. Evenings were still peaceful. Kwesi liked to sit on the balcony, feeling the warm air and listening to the distant sounds of the city. Ajoa would join him sometimes, holding a small cup of tea. They would talk about their day, the market, the neighbors, and the small joys they found in life. The rustling sound and the faint smell were there, but they were pushed aside by the comfort of ordinary moments. At night, when Kwesi lay in bed, he sometimes remembered the rustling sound. It came back in fragments of memory, and he would quietly check under the mattress before lying down fully. Nothing was ever there. The mattress looked normal. The floor was clean. Nothing seemed unusual. He felt relief and a little pride that he had checked, and he drifted off to sleep, forgetting the small hints that were quietly surrounding them. Ajoa also had her moments of curiosity. When she cleaned the bedroom, she sometimes looked at the mattress more carefully, wondering if she was imagining things. She would lift it slightly, check under it, and then smile at herself for worrying. "Silly," she would say softly. She never imagined that anything important could actually be hiding under their mattress. To her, the apartment was safe, familiar, and comfortable. Weeks passed, and the small signs continued, though neither Kwesi nor Ajoa paid them much attention. The apartment remained warm and cozy. The balcony plants thrived under Ajoa's care. Kwesi's cooking filled the home with delicious smells. They laughed, shared stories, and lived comfortably. The tiny rustling, the faint smell, and the occasional odd shadow became part of the background of their peaceful life, something unimportant, easily ignored. They never questioned why these small things happened. They never imagined that these tiny hints could lead to something significant. They believed life was ordinary, simple, and predictable. The small signs were just part of the home, like the walls, the floor, or the windows. Nothing seemed unusual enough to investigate seriously. Even when friends visited, they never noticed anything unusual either. Visitors would admire the balcony, comment on the plants, or praise Kwesi's cooking. No one mentioned rustling sounds or faint smells. These signs were subtle, almost invisible, and easily ignored. Only Kwesi and Ajoa sensed them, but even they pushed them aside, focusing instead on the comfort and joy of ordinary life. In the evenings, after dinner, Kwesi and Ajoa would sit together on the sofa. They would drink tea, talk quietly, and enjoy the calm of the apartment. The rustling sounds and faint smells were there, waiting quietly, but they were not part of the conversation. Life was simple and they preferred it that way. They liked the feeling of safety, familiarity, and peace. Kwesi sometimes wondered about mysteries in life, but he never considered that their apartment might hold one. Ajoa sometimes thought about hidden things in books or stories, but she never imagined that something in their mattress could be more than ordinary dust or small insects. The idea of discovery was exciting, but it seemed far away, like a story in a book rather than their own life. And so, life went on. The small signs appeared and disappeared. Kwesi and Ajoa continued with their routines, enjoying the quiet mornings, warm meals, and peaceful nights. They ignored the hints, thinking nothing important was happening. They trusted their home, trusted their life, and trusted each other. The rustling under the bed, the faint smell from the mattress, and the subtle oddities in the apartment were quietly waiting. They were small, almost invisible, but persistent. Life carried on, ordinary and peaceful, as the hints went unnoticed. Kwesi made breakfast. Ajoa watered the plants. They laughed. They loved each other. And all the while, Something unusual waited quietly under the mattress, ready to be discovered one day. One morning, Kwesi decided it was time to change the bed sheets. The old sheets had become slightly faded, and the smell he had once ignored now seemed stronger. Ajoa was busy in the kitchen making tea and Kwesi moved to the bedroom. He pulled off the old sheets carefully, folding them neatly and placing them on the chair by the dresser. As he prepared to lift the mattress, he felt a small shiver of curiosity. He had never really looked under it, not in all the years they had lived there. With a deep breath, Kwesi grabbed the edge of the mattress and lifted it slowly. For a moment, nothing seemed unusual. The floor underneath was clean just as it always had been. But then his hand brushed against something solid and hard. He froze. He bent down to take a closer look and realized it was a small, dusty box tucked in the corner beneath the mattress. It was old, with faded colors and tiny scratches along its edges, like it had been hidden there for decades. Kwesi pulled the box out carefully and set it on the bed. He wiped some of the dust away with his hand and turned to call Ajoa. "Ajoa, come here quick," he shouted. Ajoa came running from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened as she saw the box on the bed. "What is it?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity. Kwesi shook his head. "I don't know. I've never seen it before." They both sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the box. It was small but heavy and its lock was old and rusty. Kwesi carefully opened the lid, and a soft cloud of dust rose into the air. Ajoa covered her nose and coughed lightly. Inside they saw neatly stacked papers, envelopes and photographs. Their eyes widened as they realized the box was full of old family memories, things they had never known existed. Kwesi picked up one of the letters and examined it closely. The handwriting was elegant and careful, and the paper had yellowed with age. "These are letters," he said, his voice quiet with wonder. "Look, Ajoa, they're from our grandparents." Ajoa's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a photograph. She held it carefully as if it were the most precious thing in the world. It was a picture of their grandparents, smiling and standing in front of an old house. They looked happy and proud, and for the first time, Kwesi and Ajoa felt a deep connection to a past they had only heard about in stories. They opened more letters and photographs, discovering stories and memories that had been kept secret for decades. There were pictures of family gatherings, old birthdays, and celebrations they had never known. The letters told stories of love, struggle, hope, and courage. Some were written during times of hardship, when their grandparents had to leave home for work or travel far away. Others were cheerful letters, full of jokes and everyday life. Each letter seemed to tell a small story, and together they formed a larger story of the family they were part of. Ajoa carefully read one letter aloud. It was from her grandmother to her grandfather, written many years ago. The words were simple but full of emotion. She paused after each sentence, letting the meaning sink in. Kwesi looked over her shoulder, reading the letters silently. They felt as if they had discovered a treasure hidden in their own home, a treasure that had waited patiently for them to find it. They spent hours going through the box. Every photograph, every letter, every small object inside seemed to tell a story. There were envelopes with stamps from places they had never visited, postcards with short messages full of affection, and little notes with advice and encouragement. Kwesi and Ajoa could feel the love and care their grandparents had put into each piece. It was as if they were sitting across from their ancestors, listening to their voices through time. As they continued to explore the box, they found small personal items as well. There was a locket with a faded picture inside, a key with a ribbon tied to it, and a small notebook filled with sketches and notes. Each item seemed to hold a secret, a memory that had been carefully preserved. Kwesi and Ajoa handled everything with care, afraid that even the slightest rough touch might damage these precious pieces of history. Ajoa paused and looked at Kwesi with wide eyes. "I can't believe this has been here all these years," she said softly. "Right under our mattress, all this time, we slept above our family's history and never knew it." Kwesi nodded, feeling a mixture of surprise and awe. "It's amazing," he said. "All this time we thought life was ordinary. But look at this, it's like we've been sleeping on a secret story." They decided to organize the letters and photographs on the bed, sorting them by date and by person. They laughed and gasped at different moments, discovering stories they had never heard before. Some were funny, like letters describing a prank at a family gathering. Others were serious, like letters written during times of difficulty. Each story brought them closer together and closer to their grandparents, whose voices seemed to speak to them through the years. Time passed quickly. What had started as a simple act of changing the sheets became an entire day of discovery. Kwesi and Ajoa moved slowly, careful not to miss any detail. They read each letter twice, looked at every photograph, and shared their thoughts with each other. The apartment that had felt ordinary and predictable now seemed alive with stories and memories. The rustling sounds and faint smells that had once been ignored suddenly seemed connected to the box, as if it had been trying to reveal itself for years. By evening, the box had revealed nearly all its contents. Kwesi and Ajoa sat on the bed, exhausted but happy. The room felt warmer, richer, and fuller than it had before. They looked at each other and smiled, feeling a deep connection not only to their grandparents but also to the history that had shaped their own lives. They realized that something as simple as a mattress could hide stories that were far greater than they had ever imagined. Ajoa held a photograph close to her chest. "I wish we had known about this sooner," she whispered. "So many stories, so many memories, all hidden here." Kwesi nodded, his hand gently resting on hers. "But at least we know now," he said. "And now we can share them, learn from them, and keep them safe." They both felt a sense of responsibility, realizing that the discovery was not just about the past, it was about preserving their family's history for the future. They spent the next few days carefully cleaning and preserving the letters and photographs. Kwesi found small boxes and folders to keep them safe, and Ajoa labeled each envelope and photograph. They talked about the stories they had discovered, sharing them with each other and laughing at the funny moments. They felt a sense of pride and wonder that they had never felt before. The apartment, once ordinary and predictable, now felt like a place of mystery and history. Every corner seemed to hold potential stories, every shadow seemed to whisper secrets, and even the mattress that had seemed ordinary became a symbol of hidden treasures. Kwesi and Ajoa felt grateful for the discovery, realizing that life often hides its most important things in the most ordinary places. At night, as they lay on the mattress, they felt a new sense of comfort. It was no longer just a place to sleep, it was a place where they had uncovered their family's past. They thought about their grandparents, imagining them laughing, loving, and living their lives long ago. The mattress had been a quiet guardian of memories, holding them safely until the right time for discovery. Kwesi and Ajoa talked about the letters and photographs, imagining the stories behind each one. They wondered about the lives their grandparents had lived, the challenges they had faced, and the joy they had experienced. Each memory seemed to teach them something new about love, patience, and the importance of family. They realized that ordinary objects could carry extraordinary stories, waiting for someone to notice. Days turned into weeks, and the discovery of the box continued to influence their lives. They shared the stories with friends and family, laughing and reflecting on the past. The small apartment that had once felt ordinary now felt full of life, love, and history. The hidden truth under the mattress had changed not only their understanding of their family but also their understanding of life itself. Kwesi and Ajoa decided that they would never ignore small signs again. They realized that life often gives hints, little clues that something important is nearby. The rustling sounds, the faint smells, and the subtle oddities in their home had been signs pointing them to the hidden box. They learned to pay attention, to be curious, and to value the ordinary places in their life because they might hold extraordinary treasures. The box remained carefully stored on a small shelf in the bedroom, a constant reminder of the hidden truth they had discovered. Kwesi and Ajoa often returned to it, reading letters again, looking at photographs, and remembering the stories. It was no longer a secret but a treasure that had become part of their everyday life. Through this experience, they realized that life was full of hidden stories, waiting to be discovered. Even the most ordinary objects, like a mattress, could hold memories that connected them to the past, shaped their present, and guided their future. Kwesi and Ajoa felt grateful for the discovery, knowing that their ordinary life had been touched by something extraordinary, something that would remain with them forever. Ajoa sat on the edge of the bed, holding a yellowed letter in her hands. Her fingers traced the elegant handwriting as she read the words carefully. She smiled softly, thinking about the person who had written it so long ago. "All this time, we slept above our family's history and never knew," she whispered almost to herself. The words made her heart feel warm, as if a hidden part of her life had suddenly been revealed. Kwesi, sitting beside her, leaned closer, curious to see the letter. He could see the emotion in Ajoa's eyes and felt a wave of surprise and joy wash over him. He had expected to find something interesting under the mattress, but he had not imagined the depth of connection it would bring. Every letter, every photograph, every small note seemed to speak across time, connecting them to their grandparents in a way they had never experienced before. The discovery was more than just old papers. It was a living link to their past. Kwesi picked up a photograph carefully, holding it in his hands. It showed their grandparents standing outside a small house, smiling at the camera. The edges were worn and the colors had faded, but the expressions were clear. There was love in their faces, a quiet happiness that spoke of a life lived fully. Kwesi felt a strange mix of emotions, joy, curiosity, and a sense of gratitude that they had been given a glimpse into this hidden world. Ajoa looked over his shoulder and read the words on one of the letters. It was a simple note, written in careful handwriting. "We hope you find happiness in the little things, for they are the treasures of life," it said. She paused and smiled, feeling the truth of those words. Life, she realized, often hides treasures in the simplest places, waiting for someone to notice them. The mattress that had seemed ordinary was not ordinary at all. It had been guarding memories, lessons, and love for decades. They spent hours that afternoon exploring the contents of the small box. Each letter told a story, sometimes joyful, sometimes sad, sometimes funny, sometimes serious. Some letters described celebrations like birthdays and weddings. Others were written during hard times, when their grandparents were far away or facing challenges. Each one seemed to carry a small piece of wisdom, a lesson about life, love, and family. Kwesi and Ajoa listened to these voices from the past with full attention, feeling a deep connection that words could not fully explain. Ajoa picked up another photograph, this one showing a large family gathering. She smiled, imagining the laughter and conversation that had filled that room long ago. "They must have had such happy moments together," she said softly. Kwesi nodded, feeling a little emotional himself. "Yes," he replied. "And it's amazing to think that these moments were hidden right here, under our mattress, waiting for us to find them." They discovered letters that had been written during times of struggle. Their grandparents had faced challenges, moved to new cities, and worked hard to provide for their families. Reading these letters made Kwesi and Ajoa realize how strong and resilient their family had been. They felt inspired and motivated, understanding that the love and determination of their grandparents had shaped the lives they now led. It was humbling to see how ordinary people could create such meaningful legacies. Ajoa held a small note that had been folded neatly inside an envelope. It was a message from one grandparent to another, expressing hope and encouragement. "Even in difficult times, hold on to love and patience," it read. She felt a lump in her throat as she read it aloud. Kwesi put his arm around her shoulder, feeling the same mix of emotions. They were both touched deeply by the thoughtfulness and care that had been preserved in these small pieces of paper. As they continued to explore, they found sketches and drawings made by their grandparents. Simple pencil drawings of flowers, houses, and little animals. Some sketches were playful, others detailed and careful. Each one revealed a different aspect of their grandparents' personalities. Kwesi and Ajoa looked at the sketches together, marveling at the creativity and attention to detail. "They were artists in their own way," Kwesi said softly, smiling. Ajoa nodded, her eyes shining with admiration. The discovery had an unexpected effect on their own relationship. Sitting together, surrounded by these letters, photographs, and sketches, they felt closer than ever. They shared stories about their own lives, reflecting on the love and guidance they had received from their parents. The hidden box had not only connected them to their grandparents but had also strengthened their bond as a couple. They realized that the lessons of the past could guide their own future, and that they were now part of a larger story that stretched across generations. Hours passed quickly as they read more letters and looked at more photographs. Some were humorous, describing playful moments or small mischiefs from long ago. Others were serious, offering advice or sharing hopes for the future. Kwesi and Ajoa laughed at the funny letters and paused to reflect on the serious ones. Each piece seemed to teach them something new about life, family, and the importance of noticing the small details that often go overlooked. Ajoa smiled as she held a letter written by her grandmother during a particularly difficult time. The words were full of hope and courage, and she felt a deep admiration for the strength her grandmother had shown. "Even when life was hard," she said, "they never stopped caring for each other or their family." Kwesi nodded, feeling the same admiration. He realized that love, patience, and kindness were the true treasures hidden in this box, waiting for someone to notice them. They found envelopes marked with different dates, carefully organized by their grandparents. The care and attention that had gone into preserving these memories impressed them both. Kwesi and Ajoa realized that their grandparents had valued their family history deeply and had wanted to make sure it was passed down. The hidden box was a bridge between the past and the present, and they felt honored to have discovered it. Even the small items in the box told stories. A small key with a ribbon, a tiny locket with a faded photograph, and old coins that had been saved carefully. Each object seemed ordinary at first, but in the context of the letters and photographs, they became meaningful symbols of a life lived fully. Kwesi and Ajoa handled each object with care, treating them as treasures rather than simple relics. By the end of the day they had explored nearly everything in the box. They sat together on the bed, surrounded by letters, photographs, and small items, feeling a mix of emotions: joy, surprise, admiration, and a quiet sense of awe. The apartment that had seemed ordinary now felt full of life and meaning. Every corner seemed to hold potential stories, and the mattress that had once been unnoticed became a symbol of hidden treasures waiting to be found. Ajoa looked at Kwesi and smiled. "It's amazing how life hides important things in the simplest places," she said softly. Kwesi nodded, feeling deeply moved. "Yes," he replied. "And we were lucky to notice it. So many stories, so much love, all here waiting for us." They held hands, feeling a profound sense of connection to their past, present, and future. Over the next few days they carefully organized the letters and photographs. They cleaned them gently, placed them in folders, and labeled each envelope and photograph. They wanted to make sure that the memories were preserved properly. Kwesi and Ajoa also talked about sharing the stories with their children and other family members. They realized that the discovery was not just about the past, it was about passing on the love, wisdom, and lessons to future generations. The experience changed how they saw their home. The apartment that had seemed ordinary and predictable now felt full of meaning. Every object, every corner, and even the smallest detail seemed capable of holding a story. Kwesi and Ajoa understood that life often hides treasures in places that seem ordinary. They learned to pay attention, to be curious, and to value the hidden moments that could teach them something important. At night, as they lay on the mattress, they felt a new sense of comfort. It was no longer just a place to sleep. It had become a place where they had uncovered their family's history, a place where they had learned about love, resilience, and connection. They imagined their grandparents smiling, knowing that their stories had finally been discovered and appreciated. The mattress, once ordinary, now felt like a guardian of memories, a silent witness to generations of life and love. Kwesi and Ajoa also began to reflect on their own lives. They realized that they wanted to live with the same care and love that their grandparents had shown. They wanted to create memories that would be meaningful, to notice the small treasures in everyday life, and to pass on these lessons to the people they loved. The discovery of the hidden box had not only connected them to the past, it had inspired them to live more fully in the present. In the weeks that followed, they shared the stories with friends and family. They laughed and cried together, reflecting on the lives of those who had come before them. They marveled at the courage, creativity, and love that had been preserved in the letters and photographs. Each story became a lesson, each memory a source of inspiration. Kwesi and Ajoa felt grateful for the discovery, knowing that their ordinary life had been touched by something extraordinary. They also became more attentive to small details in their home. They noticed small signs, little changes, and subtle hints that might have gone unnoticed before. They realized that life often gives clues about hidden treasures, and it was important to pay attention. The rustling sounds, faint smells, and tiny oddities that had once been ignored were now reminders that even the ordinary could be extraordinary if you looked closely. The hidden truth under the mattress had taught them a powerful lesson. Life is full of treasures, often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. Kwesi and Ajoa felt a deep sense of gratitude for their grandparents and for the chance to discover their family's history. They understood that love, patience, and attention to small details were more valuable than anything else. The box, the letters, the photographs, and even the mattress had become symbols of the extraordinary in the ordinary. Kwesi and Ajoa's hearts were full as they sat together on the bed, reflecting on everything they had discovered. They felt connected to their past, inspired in the present, and hopeful for the future. The emotional impact of the hidden box would stay with them forever, shaping how they lived, loved, and noticed the world around them. It was a reminder that life is rich with meaning, even in the simplest places, and that treasures often wait patiently to be found by those who care to look. From that day, Kwesi and Ajoa looked at their home with new eyes. Every corner, every wall, and every object seemed to carry meaning that they had not noticed before. The discovery of the small, dusty box under the mattress had changed more than just their understanding of the past, it had changed the way they lived in the present. They realized that ordinary life could hide extraordinary treasures if only one paid attention. They walked slowly through their apartment, noticing details they had previously ignored. The cracks in the walls no longer seemed ordinary, they seemed like quiet witnesses to the life that had passed through the apartment over the years. The windows, which once simply let in light, now felt like frames through which stories of the city and the people outside could be seen. The small balcony, which Ajoa loved for her plants, became a place where they could pause and reflect on life, remembering the stories they had found under the mattress. Kwesi often paused by the kitchen, noticing the small scratches on the counter where he had prepared meals over the years. He thought about how those counters had been part of so many ordinary moments: breakfasts shared in quiet mornings, lunches made with love, and dinners that marked the end of long days. Each moment, he realized, was part of a larger story, just as the letters in the box had been part of a larger family story. Ajoa joined him in these reflections, smiling as she remembered the joy of discovering their grandparents' letters and photographs. The home they had taken for granted now felt alive, full of history and meaning. They shared the stories they had found with their children, telling them about the letters, photographs, and small objects in the box. The children listened with wide eyes and bright curiosity, laughing at the funny stories and marveling at the serious ones. Kwesi and Ajoa laughed too, realizing how blind they had been to the hidden treasures in their own home. "We slept above all this history without knowing it," Kwesi said one evening, holding a photograph carefully. Ajoa nodded, smiling. "And now we know," she replied. "And we must make sure that our children know too." The mattress, once just a place to sleep, became a symbol in their home. It was no longer ordinary furniture. It represented the hidden stories that surround us, waiting to be discovered. Kwesi and Ajoa would often sit on the bed together, remembering the day they found the box and the emotions they felt as they uncovered each letter and photograph. They realized that the ordinary moments of life, making breakfast, watering plants, cleaning the apartment, were just as important as the extraordinary discoveries. Life, they understood, was full of lessons if one only looked carefully. Kwesi and Ajoa began to notice small things in their home that they had previously ignored. The soft creak of the floorboards became a comforting sound rather than an ordinary noise. The faint rustling that Kwesi had once heard under the bed now seemed like a gentle reminder that life could hold secrets in the most ordinary places. Even the faint smell from the mattress, which had worried Ajoa at first, became a memory of the moment they discovered the hidden box. Each small sign that had once been ignored now had a story attached to it, a lesson that life had quietly been teaching them. They also started to take better care of their home. Not just by cleaning or organizing, but by treating each object with respect. The letters and photographs were stored carefully, and Kwesi and Ajoa handled them with reverence. They began to think about other objects in the apartment, old books, small ornaments, and even the furniture, and considered the history they might hold. Life, they realized, was not just about what was visible or immediately important. It was about the small, hidden treasures that often go unnoticed, the stories that are quietly waiting for someone to discover them. Kwesi and Ajoa also spent time reflecting on the lessons they had learned from their grandparents. They realized that life was full of love, patience, and courage, often expressed in small, ordinary ways. Their grandparents' letters had taught them that even during difficult times, kindness and hope could prevail. They had learned to value family, to cherish memories, and to notice the little things that make life meaningful. Kwesi and Ajoa decided that they would carry these lessons into their own lives, not just by preserving the stories they had discovered, but by living with awareness, care, and love. Every evening, the couple would sit on the balcony, looking out at the city and talking about the day. Sometimes they would read a letter aloud, sharing the story with each other or with their children. Other times, they would simply sit quietly, reflecting on the past and the lessons it offered. Life had become richer, more meaningful, because they had learned to notice the treasures hidden in their ordinary surroundings. The apartment that had once seemed ordinary now felt like a living museum of memories, both past and present. The children began to participate in this newfound appreciation of their home. They would help organize the letters and photographs, ask questions about the stories, and even draw their own pictures inspired by the sketches in the box. Kwesi and Ajoa watched their children with pride, realizing that the discovery had sparked curiosity and creativity in the next generation. They understood that sharing these stories was not just about preserving the past, but also about inspiring the future. Kwesi and Ajoa also shared the stories with close friends and relatives. They invited them to see the letters and photographs, telling the tales of their grandparents' lives. Friends were amazed at the discovery and often asked how such a treasure could remain hidden for so long. Kwesi and Ajoa would smile and explain how sometimes life hides its most valuable lessons in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. Each retelling of the story strengthened their own appreciation of the hidden treasures in life. Even ordinary tasks became more meaningful. Cooking breakfast, washing dishes, watering plants, and folding laundry, all these activities felt different. They were no longer just chores. They were part of a life that was rich with history, stories, and love. Kwesi would often think of a letter while cooking, imagining the meals their grandparents might have prepared or the conversations they might have had. Ajoa would think about a photograph while tending to her plants, imagining the gardens her grandparents had cared for. Every small task was now connected to a larger story, and this brought a sense of purpose and joy to their everyday life. The mattress remained a central symbol in their home.